Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch, and today I just had a great conversation with Jordan Sillars. You guys might know him. He's one of the editors over at MeatEater. I actually got to work with him on a article that I wrote about a melanistic white-tailed deer on my family ranch. It was kind of the second article about melanism that I wrote, and I pitched it out to him. We worked together on getting that, and through getting to know him and kind of emailing back and forth and chatting with him, I was like, you know what? This would be a really great guest. And I was right. He is a phenomenal guest. Kind of talked about his history in the outdoors, kind of getting into writing, first being a freelancer with MeatEater and then being the full-time editor there too. So he's one of two who spends most times with editing and, working with other personalities within the MeatEater family and kind of putting together articles. So it's not just submissions from the outside he's working on. He's putting out a lot and he's writing a lot of wonderful articles himself. We talked about, one of the ones was about kind of suppressors and wait time and some of the other ones he's working on and interested in. So, we kind of covered that a little bit and it was just neat to hear a little bit more about his history as a writer and, being an English doctorate and all the things that he's involved in. So a lot of fun. We talk a little bit about cooking some wild game, hunting too. So, yeah, a little bit of everything for the outdoor enthusiast that is now tuning in today. So hope you guys enjoy. I'll have all the links below where you can go and check out a lot of the articles he's written, as well as, some links to his Instagram page. And if you want to follow along some of the fun stuff he's involved in, then, that is where you will go. Without further ado, here is my interview with Jordan Sillars of MeatEater. Y'all enjoy. Hey, Jordan, how you doing today, man?
Good. Yeah, doing well. Just, trying to catch up on sleep. We were just talking before we started. I have a newborn in the house. So
Yes. How many
if
weeks
I
now?
lose, yeah, if I lose my train of thought, that's why.
That's
Three
fair.
weeks.
3 weeks.
Yep, three
Right
weeks.
on. And this a boy or girl?
Boy.
All
Yep,
right.
Pax. We named him Pax. He's healthy, doing well, but not sleeping a whole lot. So neither am I.
Indeed. Well, hopefully, are you still on some paternity leave? Are you getting some time off to kind of adjust before you have to go back into the full-time swing?
Yeah. MeatEater has a great paternity leave policy. I took 3 weeks, so today's actually my last day. Back to the grindstone tomorrow, but we're in a good spot, as far as mom and baby and the rest of the kids. So yeah, it should be good.
Nice, nice. Well, I definitely want to chat about the grind and what it is and your day-to-day to MeatEater, but I think, with a lot of my guests, I like to kind of start with a little bit of introduction on where you're born and raised and, specifically for you, how you got the writer bug and, obviously been a voracious reader and a writer for a long time. I know you had some influence with your family there too. So, and then I kind of wanted to talk about your love of the outdoors and how you kind of, eventually, became a part of working with MeatEater and, your trajectory there, getting your doctorate, all the different things there. So, I figure if we can just kind of start at the beginning, man, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, kind of how those influences came about, maybe some of your mentorship and kind of, we'll, thread that needle as we go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is just north of North Dakota, in Canada. My whole family is from Canada, grandparents, uncles, aunts. My immediate family, my parents and my sister and I moved down to Texas when I was young. And then when I was about 10, we moved over to Virginia. We were following kind of my dad's career path. And so when people ask me, where'd you grow up? Usually I say Virginia because that's sort of the easiest answer. But so we lived there since I was 10, and my folks and my sister are still there. So that would be Northern Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, just west of DC. So that's sort of where I grew up. I have one younger sister, I'm the oldest. Uh, in terms of kind of outdoor experience, I guess. I didn't grow up in a hugely outdoorsy family. My dad was really into sports, and he's a writer, he's a journalist. He loved to read. So he really instilled those loves in me. I got into the outdoors really through friends. I had a good buddy growing up who was a Boy Scout. So I was kind of ended up being sort of an honorary Boy Scout. I would like go volunteer at like the Christmas tree like farm where the Boy Scouts sold Christmas trees sometimes. And then I had some other friends who were big anglers, so we'd go out and do these floats down the Shenandoah River, where we'd fish and camp, and that was a lot of fun. Um, but I'm somewhat of an adult onset hunter. I didn't get into hunting really until college, and I didn't really get into it until I got married. And my father-in-law and my brother-in-law are both big hunters, so that's sort of really when I caught the bug. So it's cool to work for MeatEater because I feel like that's a big part of our audience that we really try to reach out to and try to serve are those folks who maybe didn't grow up in the outdoors too much but are interested. And so it's great to be able to serve those folks and help them along that path.
Well, and I hear that so many times from people who said that Meat Eater was kind of their gateway into getting into hunting,
Hmm.
and really kind of having exploring things. I know that, you talked in a previous interview about kind of the food idea and kind of got you into that. I remember you mentioned one of the books that was influential to you is The Omnivore's Dilemma, right? Was that one that
Hmm.
kind of, like, what was it that then you kind of decided that this was something I want to kind of pursue a little bit more? Because obviously, you've talked a lot about your hunting episodes and going around, and you've talked about different rifles and calibers. Like, you're definitely a voice of someone who knows a lot now. So what was it that kind of took that interest into then kind of moving into, and lack of better words, a more professional setting of what you're doing
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. So if you're trying to get into the outdoors, there's sort of two ways to do it. There's two paths. The one path is you're just like a badass hunter, right? Like you're just really good at that aspect of it. And then the other way is you're a communicator, right? So whether you're a video producer, podcast producer, or a writer, you kind of get into it through that avenue. And you really need both, right? Like I'm an editor at MeatEater, but I don't write like how-to whitetail articles because we have guys who are those like badass hunters who know so much more than I do. Even though, I know quite a bit, I'm not like at that expertise level. But I am a writer. I have a PhD in English. I've published in many different places, both academic journals as well as stuff like MeatEater, gun magazines, things like that. So that's sort of the way that I got into it. I had this interest, and then I had this sort of pre-developed skill as a writer, and I really wanted to join those two together. So it really started out with an interest in firearms, an interest in hunting, and I needed a way to fund that hobby, right? Because it's expensive.
It is.
It's super expensive, and so I just had some opportunities to do some freelance writing, and then I realized I just really love this. It's what I want to do every day. And so I just looked for opportunities, eventually got in at MeatEater as a freelancer, did that for 2 years. And then I basically just begged them for a full-time position. And they were like, yeah, all right, yeah, we can do that. Spencer Newhart's really the one that kind of made that happen. Shout out to him. And yeah, so they brought me on full time and here I am. But yeah, it's been, it's been a journey. I didn't know a whole lot sort of starting out. There's definitely a learning curve with a lot of this stuff, but like I say, I had developed skill as a writer, and so editors liked working with me because they didn't have to edit my stuff too much. And you know,
That's a huge plus.
yeah, as an editor now, it's great. Like if someone sends you something, an article, and you don't have to do too much to it, you're going to be more likely to want to work with that person in the future for sure.
Sure, sure. So, what does that look like on your end as far as, being an editor? You're getting submissions, sometimes unsolicited, or maybe there's some people who are kind of, regular performers as far as sending stuff in. Obviously, I'd had an article that I had sent to you, and we worked together on that, and that got published on the
Yep.
website there
Yep.
about, melanistic deer. And so that was, I kind of see from, the writer's side of things what it is you guys are doing, and, maybe tracking how many words you're trying to do, what you kind of fit in this article, and what form and format. But what does that look like on your end as far as your day to day? I guess because obviously you're remote, you're here in Texas,
Mhm.
a bunch of the camps out there in Montana, and everyone else is kind of scattered around and stuff. But as far as that being a remote position as it is, I was curious about that. What does that day to day look like on that for you?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's really a mix. We have our regular writers, our regular freelancers, and we'll solicit pitch ideas from them. We'll send out emails saying, hey, send us, 10 article ideas. And we'll sort of comb through that list and see which ones we want to write or we want you to write. And so we'll assign out those articles to those regular writers. And then, we'll also get, like you say, kind of unsolicited messages. Sometimes people will send us whole articles and say, I wrote this thing. Are you guys interested in publishing it? And sometimes it's just an idea. Here's a story that I've been tracking down, or here's a really interesting hunt that I went on. Would you guys like me to write this up? And so, we take those on a case by case basis. Like I say, if you send something in that's just really clean and well written and interesting, that you're gonna have a better shot, right? A better shot than just an email with an idea. But yeah, it's a mix. We rely on both to produce content for the website. So yeah.
And not only are you editing, you're writing too. You have articles that you're putting out there. There's one recently that you talked about with the change in the ATF waiting times for suppressors. I mean, I remember going ahead and buying one and having that. I think mine was like an 11 and a half month wait. And I'm hearing about some people now who it's like 4 or 5 days. And
Mhm.
we look at other countries where you can go over there and you can find one on the shelf, pick it up and walk out with it. And I think that would be the ultimate goal here in the US. And you kind of point to that in your article, but I was wanted to kind of chat about that too, and maybe some of the other articles you've written. But what was that? What are you seeing when you were researching that article? And I know that you have one here by your side too. And why don't you talk a little bit about that experience, what that was like for you, and what kind of feedback you're getting? Because there's a lot of comments on that post too. I'm sure a lot of excitement left and right from folks not having to wait to have
Yeah.
some nice hearing issues.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's so much with this story. I think my big takeaway is just how insane it is that so just for background in case you're unaware,
Mhm.
in order to buy a suppressor, it's a bit more of a process than just purchasing a firearm. It goes through the ATF. You have to pay a $200 tax. There's a bit more just red tape basically. And in the past, the wait time, you would submit your application, the wait time to be approved to then take your suppressor home was, anywhere from 6 months to a year. I had to wait about 12 months for the last one that I got. Um, and since March, those wait times have been significantly reduced, right? So we're going from like 200 days on average to now the average is 4 days. And the idea that, and I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm interested in this and I kind of nerd out about this stuff, but to me, like the idea that a giant regulatory agency of the federal government could increase their efficiency that much, I mean, that's crazy, right? Like, when have you ever heard of that happening? Like
Never.
at any kind of like state, federal, like bureaucracy. I mean, this is insane. So I heard about this from a buddy who said that he was hearing that some guys were getting approved in like a week, a couple days. I think I've heard of like same day, right? You go in, you fill out your form, you hear back the same day that you're approved. So I heard about it, but was sort of like, oh, whatever. Like took it with a bit of a grain of salt. But then I went to purchase a suppressor, and I talked to the guy at the gun store, and he was like, "Yeah, average wait time now is 7 to 10 days." I was like, "That cannot be true. Like, that's insane." So that's sort of where the idea for the article came from. And so I talked with Knox Williams at the American Suppressor Association. They're great. If you want to support the deregulation of suppressors, they do great work. They've been instrumental in legalizing suppressors in states, but also in legalizing them for hunting. Because it used to be, 20, 25 years ago, there were a lot of states where you couldn't hunt with a suppressor, which I mean doesn't make a lot of sense,
No.
right? Especially for hunters, because we don't want to wear hearing protection. And so it's great to be able to use the suppressor. So I talked with Williams, also talked with the Silencer Central, one of the biggest ammo silencer dealers in the country. And they both really told the same story. It was really just a matter of some personnel changes where some new people came in and they actually took a hard look at the process that they used to approve the forms. And they realized that 80% of what they were doing was unnecessary because now a lot of the forms you submit electronically. And so the computer can verify, yes, this is a real address, or, whatever the computer can verify automatically, it can do that. So they cut 80% of that work. And they also did something that didn't make any sense before. They had this policy that was kind of a first in, first out policy, so that if someone ahead of you in line got delayed, usually the delay happens at the background check stage because you get confused with someone else, so they have to track down, like, make sure you're not a felon. If someone in front of you got delayed, your application was also delayed. And so that just gummed up the whole system. Now, what they do is if you get delayed, you're delayed. But if you get an instantaneous approval, which happens with 70% of those background checks, you just get pushed forward along through the process. So that's really what they did. And it wasn't like, I thought maybe they'd gotten tons more money. Maybe they'd hired like 1,000 more agents to approve these forms. No, it turns out they could have done this years ago, right? That's the other thing that's so infuriating. Like the electronic filing system first came out in 2015. It broke immediately. But if they had fixed it then and done these things then, this could have been for the last decade, just a few day wait times. So that's that article. It's on the MeatEater.com. There's more details there. There's lots of good quotes if you want to check it out. But yeah, as you can tell, I got pretty excited about the story, and
Yeah.
super fun to report it.
Well, it's a huge move forward. I mean, the idea that people would have their money tied up for up to a year, I think a lot of people are just is discouraging. And
Hmm.
most people are trying to use this to be able to have hearing safe rifles. And of course, for those who may not be familiar, who are listening, the suppressors are not going to silence it. This Hollywood idea that you're using a silencer, suppressor, and it's, just mouse fart quiet. That's not what's happening. It will reduce it by a certain amount of decibels, but to be where it'll be hearing safe and you can keep your, full attention out to everything you do, especially in a hunting environment when, you want to hear every single thing and maybe you don't want to have to make movements to put in your earplugs or, any kind of headset or anything like that. So it's a huge move forward. It's something that I think should be more readily available because it's really going to help. And I know there's like the Safe Hearing Act and things too. And well, I'll put a link in below for everyone to go check that out. And it's, I liked your analogy there in the article too. Kind of making it akin to like this idea of like a drive-through, right? Like if like a
Hmm.
Chick-fil-A or something where it's like, okay, just you pull over here. We're going to bring you your food. Everyone else behind you is going to keep, trucking through. And it's just a huge difference in how long ago could this have been made. But hey, it's here now. We got to be
Yeah.
thankful for it and kind of move forward. What are some other articles that you've been working on recently as far as writing that may be coming out, or can you, kind of talk about that, or maybe some of the things that you hope to, put some time into once you're kind of getting back in there in the swing of things full time? As there are some
Yeah.
articles that are very interesting. Obviously hunting season's upon us soon. So I was just kind of curious what, have your creative juices flowing in that sense.
Yeah. So we've recently started doing full hands-on gun reviews. We hadn't historically done those in the past, and I pushed pretty hard for us to do that. So we've been starting to do that. So there's a few there already. I'm working on one on the Tika T3X light rough tech. That's kind of a mouthful. But then I put it in an MDT Hunt 26 stock, which, I mean, the price tag on those things is significant, but man, like when you pull that thing out of the box, it is so light. Those stocks are insanely light. So I've had a chance to take that rifle out a bit, do some accuracy testing, looking really good. Pretty small groups, especially from such a light rifle that will you can take it anywhere. So I have that coming out here fairly shortly. I have a bit more testing to do on that. I'm also working on an article that was inspired by, I went out when the NRA show was here in
Mhm.
Fort Worth. The Rock Island auction had one of their big auctions at their new facility in Fort Worth. And they had me out to look at, all the awesome guns they had up for sale. And so it got me thinking, you know, how do you get into gun collecting? Whether it's just kind of as a hobby because you think it's fun, or whether like this is a significant investment opportunity. Maybe, you start now in like your 30s and 40s and you hope one day that, this will be a potential source of retirement income. So I've been talking with those guys about that. I'm going to be publishing an article in the next few weeks on that topic as just sort of an introduction to like how do you get started collecting guns? How do you figure out like what's a good deal? Which direction to go in. And if the audience is interested in that, we can do more specific like collecting 1911s or collecting military surplus rifles or those sort of more specific things. But that's something that I've been interested in for a long time, and so it'll be fun to look into that more.
Well, on those notes, is there any kind of firearms that you collect, or that there's something that you're like, one of these days I'm going to own that one? Is there anything that kind of, you know,
Yeah.
you fancy in that
Um,
sense?
yeah, so I'm not a big gun collect. I mean, I have a lot of guns, but I don't collect in terms of like, as investments or like any specific category. I do the one gun that I bought sort of as an investment, and this is how I convinced my wife to let me buy it, is an M1 Garand. I saw those were creeping up in price. It used to be like 600 bucks you could get one, and then it was like 800, and now it's like 1500. So that's one that I really jumped on when I had an opportunity to get that gun. And it's one of my favorite guns by far. One thing that came up in my conversation with the Rock Island guys is just old 22s. I'm interested in that just because they're everywhere. You can find them everywhere, and they're not very expensive, right? It's real entry level. You can get a beat up old 22 for like 150 bucks. And so I think if I was to start, I would probably start there just because it's, not that expensive. And I love 22. I love shooting them anyway. So that's something that I definitely consider.
That's actually something I'm looking at right now. Is I have some older 22s, but being able to add the suppressor or even one of the internal suppressed barrels,
Hmm.
and so I'm in a deep dive right now, looking at all these and contacting some companies who I have friends that work with, and just kind of seeing what we might be able to work with some partnerships. But 22s, I mean, it's the gateway. It's so much fun,
Yeah.
so cheap. I mean, used to be a little bit cheaper. Bricks are a little bit more for than what they used to be.
Yeah.
But it's such a great thing to do out there and take out, kids and people who are first time shooters, to being able to get them comfortable to moving that, being able to have something that's semi-automatic or even just the bolt action, getting used to having that kind of thing. It's I mean, they're just the most fun to shoot, I think. And very hearing safe in a lot of ways, especially if you have a suppressor on there too. It's
Oh yeah, for sure. We have a little break action 22 that we shoot with the kids in the backyard. And that with a suppressor with that CCI has this like 710 FPS. It's just like insanely quiet. I mean, my pellet rifle is like twice as loud as this 22. And that's so much fun. So much fun out in the backyard.
Is that a subsonic ammo, or is
Oh
it?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Yep. Yeah. 710 is quite a bit. And I think speed of sound's like 1100
yeah, yeah.
FPS, something like that, somewhere around there. So yeah, 710 is quite a bit quieter. And so with the suppressor, I mean, it's like you can barely hear it. And so the kids love it. My neighbors love it.
They're like, we don't even know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too loud.
Well, when we're talking about kind of hunting and kind of getting into that, I was just curious, what are your favorite hunts to go on? Are you do you like to do some duck hunting and some, waterfowl? Is there some things that kind of, or is it, big game or small game? I believe I remember reading something about you have an affinity towards squirrel hunting, if that is correct. Tell me
Oh
about kind
yeah.
of what it is, and what does your, year-long season look like? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, no, I love squirrel hunting. We can definitely start there. I think the thing with squirrel hunting, and I mean, maybe I'm just, because again, I didn't grow up doing it. So most people, they associate that with like, I did this when I was a kid and now I do other things. But I just love it. I think the thing with squirrel hunting is it's sort of like fishing and hunting combined because you take more than one shot and you can bring home more than one animal, right? And so there's lots of opportunities. It's not just you're sitting in a tree, you have one shot, maybe a year, to get your deer or whatever it is. You're walking through the woods. It's not like you don't have to be, you know, completely quiet. So I take my son who's almost old enough to shoot his own. And then just the marksmanship practice is so fun because there's, any shooting position, against a tree, on the ground, kneeling, right? Whatever it is, there's lots of opportunities to practice all those shooting positions and just really practice your marksmanship. And then once you're done, they're really good to eat, right? Whether you want to throw it in a crock pot, if they're young squirrels, bread them and fry them. They're amazing. So yeah, I think it's so fun. And you also, here in Texas, we don't have massive tracts of public land. But the public land we do have, there's lots of opportunities for squirrel hunting there. There's some just about an hour north of me, a wildlife management area. We squirrel hunted there. But then, landowners, oftentimes it's like, yeah, go ahead, especially if you can say, like, I want to bring my son with me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's why I'm going. They're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, hunt squirrels. So it's easy to get permission. So that's a lot of fun. So we do that here in East Texas. We actually have a squirrel season, which goes from October to the end of February. And then we have the month of May. You can hunt squirrels. So we do that. If I can get a deer quickly, it's better squirrel hunting. Because if I have to wait until February, the squirrels just aren't around too much. So yeah, whitetail until I get what I want, and then squirrel. And then when the white bass are spawning up the creeks in the spring, I do that. And then a lot of the rest of the year is pig hunting. So I try to get out and get a few pigs most years. So that sort of captures my year here in East Texas. And I mean, I'm happy with it. I don't do a whole lot of like cross country big hunting trips. I'm not really at the place in life with a bunch of young kids and not tons of disposable income. I like to kind of stick close to home.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, and there's so much wild game you're just talking about. I mean, to fill your freezer throughout the year,
Hmm.
and a nice kind of selection. When, I was thinking too, like obviously with the Meat Eater crew, there's a lot of people who are very well versed in cooking wild game. And obviously you got, Steve and his cookbooks and everyone who's been a part of that, and I was thinking when you were talking about squirrels, you got Brent and Clay who are going to the world champions, squirrel cook off and stuff.
Yep.
I figure there's a lot of opportunities for you to kind of marinate in some of those recipes. I was curious if there's any in particular go-tos that you might have either found on your own or that may have been influenced or shared from some of those folks that are your peers over at MeatEater.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. So I am not a big chef. At least I haven't been sort of historically. But it's been so fun to get more into wild game cooking. Really inspired by my colleagues at MeatEater. Maggie Hudlow, who is the person I really work with the most. Amazing chef. She's always sending me like, "Hey, here's what I made. Doesn't this look good?" And it's like, "Yeah, that looks amazing." And if I have questions like about ingredients or recipes, she's a great resource. So she's really, kind of inspired me to do a little bit more of that. And so yeah, I for the Super Bowl this last year, I made a squirrel buffalo ranch dip, which was awesome. It was very good. Just recently, I made ground venison enchiladas, also from the Meat Eater website, which was awesome. And just to plug the website, I think we have a great setup. If you click on that recipes tab, you can sort by ingredient. So if you have, venison, if you have duck, if you have whatever kind of fish, you can just sort by that ingredient, and it gives you all the recipes for that ingredient. So I say that because I've used that quite a bit.
Sure.
If I have a venison roast, click on that. and it gives me everything that I need there. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. And one of the things that MeatEater's really done is open that up to a lot more people.
Yeah.
Just the focus on food is really valuable, and it adds value to the hunting experience, to the general public. Really, I think if you look at a lot of those, like if when they take polls of support for hunting, if they add hunting for food, support goes up by like 15% or whatever. So people are much more open to hunting if they know it's for food. And if you can make delicious things with that meat, even better. I mean, that'll make it that much easier to push for that use for hunting.
Yeah, 100%. It's like my buddy Matthew Mitchell, that I hunt with. He's done some of the co-hosting on the podcast too. He's always saying that, like, there's a lot of people who say, when you hit the whatever you're shooting at, right? It's like all of a sudden the animal's down. It's like, okay, that's when the work begins. He's like, that's when the fun begins. That's where he's like
Yeah.
envisioning all these ideas of what you're going to cook and how you're going to take this, eye around or whatever you're going to do and how are you going to prepare it and all the meals you're going to share with your family and friends and that kind of collective experience, all the neighbors. I mean, I
Yep.
love sharing that. And it's amazing how many people you get in and you can kind of inspire from the food aspect. And then it's like, oh, I really like this. So this is really good. You know where it's from. It's not full of a bunch of just chemicals and, pesticides or whatever it is that could be into the meals
Yep.
that, you pick up at the grocery store. Right. But I feel like that is a great introduction to get people into the idea of hunting, which is, it's like kind of growing up, right? If you don't have a parent, a grandparent to get you into it, you end up being an, adult onset hunter or
Yep.
however it is, a friend or brother-in-law, whoever it is that brings you to the table. And I grew up with it. So it's second nature. I'd go up to Boston when I went to school and tell all my friends about hunting. And they're like, you hunt what? You were allowed at 7 years old to carry a gun around? I'm like, yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that what everyone did? It's
Yeah.
culturally I was used to it, but I see that a lot. And I love that MeatEater. I hear so many times that that's a huge resource because, Steve and everyone, as they're talking about the idea of like, conservation, all the different ethics and principles and, what it comes to, it's a very educational thing. And I think your articles that you write, that you help edit have been, really instrumental in kind of helping guide that along. So I'm very excited to, continue to see all those articles you got going on. Speaking of writing, I was curious, being a writer yourself, is there any plans that you ever want to jump in and do your own book? Is there anything that you really want to have a deep dive into that maybe you haven't yet? Or maybe there's something even you're working on that, maybe hasn't been brought up in that sense yet. I was just kind of curious as far as that writer side of you, what may be coming
Yeah.
down the pike.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I've told people that I think I have a book in me, but I don't know what it's going to be about yet. So yeah, there's definitely interest there. I'd love to tackle some big project. I wrote a dissertation for my doctorate that was about 19th century novels and how they imagined the wilderness, the American wilderness. So I've considered something along those lines, but written for a more general audience. But nothing's really kind of distilled yet in my mind. So yeah, I appreciate that question, but I don't have anything specific right now.
Well, when it comes to that, I can't wait to read it. I mean, you're a phenomenal writer, man, and it's you can tell when you have an interest in something and you kind of run with it. And I definitely hats off to you on that. It's the whole team, man. There's so many great writers there. It's such a wealth of information, fun, entertaining, educational all around. So that's great. Speaking of writing and books, what are some of the things that you have been reading lately? I know maybe in the last few weeks you're not as much time to do that because you're kind of busy. But as far as what are some of the things that you like to read and absorb, kind of on a day to day or week to week? What are some of those that capturing your attention?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because I have actually been able to read something that I've read quite a bit of at 2 in the morning feeding an infant, because I've been able to listen to it. I've been listening through Jack Carr's books, who I know you've met, which is awesome,
Mhm.
and his James Reece novels. And so he just came out with his most recent one a few weeks ago, I guess now,
Mhm.
or a few months ago.
Yep.
So yeah, I've been listening through that, and that's been a lot of fun. I love those books. They're very entertaining. Though I will say, and I'd be curious to get your take on this. I felt that not this most recent one, but the one before that, I felt it dragged a little bit at times. And I don't know if your listeners are interested in this, if they've read them or not. But the first one's action packed, awesome, tons of fight scenes. And then you can tell Jack Carr is like a real nerd about history, which is awesome. But sometimes it just like keeps going and going. Those like historical like explanations of events and things just kind of keep going. I felt like there was a little too much of that maybe in this last one. But the most recent one is awesome. It's really moved along quite a bit.
Yeah, so you're talking about the last one was Only the Dead, and we got Red Sky Morning, the new one.
Yep.
And it's funny because um I heard a lot of people make that same comment. They were like that there was too much break in action, but there's so much complexity to the story and the set and setting and what's happening that I feel like it's for those who want to deep dive into that because a lot of these novels that he's writing, you can almost look. I mean, I got sent Red Sky Morning ahead of time because I was going to be interviewing him for his book tour, and I'm reading it, and I remember opening it up, and they were talking about China and Taiwan, and I'm not going to go too much into details for those who haven't read it yet, but I remember like flipping on the TV, or I think maybe my mother-in-law had the TV on and it was talking about how China was doing their drill around Taiwan. Like they didn't go and invade, but they basically said, if we're going to do it, here's how we do it. And they kind of did the whole setting up of that and kind of practicing the invasion. And then in the book, they're talking about that too. So the alignment of real-time events is really, I mean, it's up to the last moment that he's talking about. He's like, I hate deadlines. I don't pay attention to him. He's like telling his publicist, cover your ears, because he's in the room. And he's like,
Yeah.
but there's so many things that, especially, I mean, here we are talking about what, this last week has been a very large week in, our history, as far as
Mhm.
being Americans and everything that's been happening here. And I think his inclusion of certain things and the details of which, you can't just maybe mention something quickly. He dives in because he's such, a pronounced historian. And I'm very
Mhm.
curious too about him. I'm excited to read his next book, the nonfiction Targeted Beirut. I guess he's going to start doing about every other year a nonfiction book.
Yeah.
But just the way these guys churn out these books, especially Jack, such high quality writing and so like, one a year it's fast. I mean, as a writer, you and an editor too, that's a lot to put out to have it be quality every time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I mean, he's clearly writing from a place where he has a lot of knowledge already. So he's not learning all of this just from scratch. And so that's going to make that process go quite a bit more quickly. I hadn't heard that he was going to do nonfiction, which I think is great because I think maybe we take like some of that like nonfiction, like historical explanation from the novels, and then we like put it in a more sort of um, in a nonfiction book that's about one specific topic that you can really go through and dive deep. And so if you really want that deep dive, then you go and read that book. If you want like an action thriller novel, then you go read about James Reece. I think part of my frustration is that with the first three books, I would listen to them when I worked out, and they were great for that. I mean, like if you want some inspiration for just like, one more set of this, it's like James Reece is that. But it's not so much with like, a very long explanation of the history of US Russia relations, right? It's like a
Right, right,
little
right.
harder to like get yourself pumped up while you're listening to
You're like,
that. Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, fascinating, and that's what I appreciate about those parts. But yeah, not great to work out to, I suppose.
That is awesome. That there's got to be a review somewhere in there about, come on, Jack, you got to do this. We're gonna, this up tempo workout stuff, and then you kind of got the
Yeah,
relaxed, maybe having a sip of a drink, and oh, that is a very interesting history you have there. But no,
Yeah.
I'm excited to see. And I mean, even with that whole the James Reece series, they got the prequel coming out here pretty soon. I know they're
Hmm.
talking about, and I was asking them too, is like, are you going to do, a season per book? And it sounds like, kind of with the second book, they're going to be doing that. It's kind of going to be its own thing. Because
Mm.
there's definitely a lot of concurrent movements that go through each book, but each one could be its own, and
Yeah.
I find it fascinating. I mean, I'm sure that you've had some where you've read a book and then the movie's made and you're like, dang, you guys did not do that justice. Where I feel like the Terminalist movie with, obviously with Chris Pratt and all the amazing other cast and people behind it, I think they
Yeah.
did just a damn fine job,
Great
taking
job.
that from pages to the screen, man. I was
Yep.
blown away at how well. And obviously there's some people that change, color of hair of, it's like the different
Yeah.
characters. I'm like, no, that person was a blonde. This person was this,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
but it's I think it's been a fascinating transition to see that. So I'm curious to see what they do with the other ones. Um,
Yeah.
any
The
other
show's
things
great.
that you're diving into these days? Are there other, kind of books or interests or things that you're kind of maybe wanting to dive into? Maybe not in like a writing editing format, but something that has your interest that you really want to learn more about and kind of, explore here.
I've been reading over the course of quite a few months, a Johnny Cash biography, and I haven't read a lot of biographies, but it's been really good, and I'm totally blanking on the name of the author, but just fascinating. I've always liked Johnny Cash's music, and I knew a little bit about his life story, but to get that long form, just from his childhood all through his career, I mean, it really makes the music have a deeper meaning when you listen to it. You can remember, like, oh yeah, this is what was happening in his life when he wrote this song, and here's how this song really catapulted his career forward. So I think I'm gonna start. I'm gonna try to do a biography. I'm gonna try to have a biography going. When I'm done with this one, I'll pick up another one of an author or a musician or someone I'm interested in. Because it's fascinating to get a window into the lives of those people.
I think it is, man. It does enrich the music. There's a
Mhm.
lot of the people that I think growing up, the era of music where I was always diving in and wanting to read about everybody, and then really kind of I could tell you some of my favorite bands is like, here's the history of this, or this might be about that. But there's a lot of folks who I didn't really dive into as much. Johnny Cash ended up being one later on, and then Willie Nelson has a
Mhm.
book that came out recently that the same kind of thing, man. You're like, oh, that's what that song was
Yeah.
about, or that era, or why he felt this one. Or man, a lot of those songs sound depressed during this time. Well, it's because maybe this
Hmm.
was happening, or whatever it was. But
Yeah.
it's enriching, man. I love reading about. I mean, just anyone in general, right? There's so many good books out there. But no, that's a great idea. I like that, man.
Yeah.
Biography, kind of always keep one going. And I like the idea of having now, I'm reading a lot with a lot of interviews I'm doing with different authors, but I like to have, I've always loved history and really the non-fictional aspect of things to study folks in their life. But I now kind of reading a little bit more fiction, which has only been the last couple of years I've been doing the podcast. It feels like a good mix to have, my head
Hmm.
in both worlds a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. And also, like pop fiction and then like classical fiction too, right? Like you can read like the Jack Carr, the like thriller type stuff, but then you go back and you read some classic American novels, right? And you kind of really get a well-rounded base. And also, I would say, just speaking of writing, the best writers are always big readers.
Yep.
I don't think you can really be a good writer without reading because writing it's imitative. You're going to imitate what you have read, and if you haven't read good stuff, then you're probably not going to be a good writer. So for anyone interested in getting into writing, just read a lot, and pay attention to how they construct their paragraphs, their sentences, their arguments, their chapters. That'll really serve you well if you're trying to improve your writing.
Great points. Speaking of which, because you're dealing with a lot of people who are sending you stuff or even, you got professional writers around you too, and you're working on their articles as well. And kind of helping, move those along. I was kind of curious too, what it is that, and, being an English major and having your doctorate as well too, like, what are some other things that maybe you would give suggestions to people who are wanting to kind of start a career in that outdoor set and setting? What are some of those things that you see maybe from the articles that you've read that maybe need improvement, or some that are, hey, that article is amazing, I don't even have to do much and I can just leave it as is for the
Mhm.
masses? What are some of the things that you might kind of advise new writers in that sense of their direction?
Yeah. Couple things. So, along with reading a lot, writing a lot is important too. And it might sound sort of obvious, but if you don't have, it can be difficult and discouraging if you don't have somewhere to publish the articles. But I think just that process of writing and being able to write quickly, that's going to help a lot. Writing is a skill. It's not something that some people are born with and some people aren't. Obviously, there's some natural tendencies that people have, but it's a skill, right? It's like any other skill. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And really paying attention to what you're reading, like I say, and not being ashamed to imitate that, right? If you have an outdoor writer that you really like, read that person's stuff and imitate it, like how it's constructed. Not like don't rip it off, obviously, but look at it and learn from it and try to implement those lessons in your own writing. Um, Another thing I would say that I think sometimes people don't um, think about, especially when they're first starting, is different outlets publish different kinds of things, right? Like here at Meat Eater, we don't publish a lot of like long form, descriptions of a hunt, right? Unless it's Pat Durkin, and then we'll publish whatever he sends us because Pat's awesome.
Yeah.
But like actually, if you're going to submit something to an outlet, go on that outlet, even if you know a bit about it, read what they have, pay attention to like, with your article, for example, we had to cut it down a little bit just because the word count that we usually publish is X and it was a little over that, right? Very common.
Right.
And I've done the same thing. I tend to be very wordy in my writing. And some of the first things I submitted, Spencer Newharth was like, "This is way too long, man. Like, we have to cut this down." So like those sorts of things will ingratiate you to editors if you clearly have a good sense of like the kind of things they publish, the topics they want to cover, right? And because of the world we live in, right? If it's an online publication, it has to be interesting enough that people will click on it, right? And that's unfortunate for me as like a literature person to say, but that's just sort of the reality of the beast. So keeping that in mind as well, like pitching ideas that will be popular and like people will be interested in. That's another thing that we don't really want to think about too much. We just want to like write from our heart, but that's not really how it works, unfortunately. Now there are places, right? Like I think like places like Gray's Sporting Journal, right? They're going to publish like more thoughtful, long form type essays, right? That kind of stuff. So different outlets publish different types of stuff. And so it's important to match what you've written to the outlet as opposed to trying to shoehorn something in that, isn't going to work and they're not going to go for. So that's, I think, just a few things sort of off the top of my head.
No, those are good, man. I think it's a lot of times you definitely have to study where it is that you want to land and what it is. Hey, if you have a style that's um, where you have a lot of creativity of descriptions, or you're kind of painting in the colors of what it is it's around you. Some journals may be that fit, where other ones are like, no, we want to have it be educational, entertainment. You want to have things that are very specific and maybe just straight to the point instead of all the colorful stuff that's, here's how I got ready
Yeah.
for this hunt. No, what was it that you were using? Why was that an advantage or whatever it is? Yeah, you gotta know your set and setting and the best format. So I think that's very important too. That was one that I felt like whenever I've shopped some articles, looking at, okay, I've written this article. Well, I think when I started that one with the melanistic deer, I had like a 4,000 words or something like that, which is ridiculous. No one, no, nobody's going to necessarily, I mean, there are folks, but most people I've found that 1,500, 2,000, maybe even 2,500 word count that I've, as far as magazines and different, online publications.
Yeah.
But no, it's good to go and research, what it is that you want to get into, and make sure you kind of, I think it helps it out as far as an editor too, is if you already have, okay, it's as close to the word count that we normally do, whatever that number may be for whatever publication.
Yeah. And
Is
one,
good. Yeah.
yeah, I guess one thing I've also found some success with is reaching out not just to the like outdoor hunt, fish, hook, bullet publications, but some more general audience. Like the one of the first things I published was first things I published in like the hunting specific space was an account of a hog hunt, and I sent it into MeatEater, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't really do this kind of thing." But then I sent it to like a more like general audience publication, and they were like, "Yeah, this is great. This like we hardly ever publish stuff like this, but we think our audience would be interested." So like expanding your horizons a little bit beyond the like American Whitetail, Guns and Ammo, like MeatEater, might help too in terms of just getting your stuff out there, like getting it in front of people, getting it out into the world. So that's another thing that I've found some success with as well.
That's a good point, and I really think, I want to hammer down your idea. It's like write, write, write. The most beneficial thing you can do as a writer is to write as much as you can. You're only going to sharpen your skills, and it's also one of the hardest things to do, right? Like a lot of people have book ideas. Hardest thing that most authors will tell you is sitting down and being disciplined enough to write it. And if you're going to try to do that as a career, you really have to find that discipline. And there may be
Yeah.
times where you put out X many thousands of words a day, and it might not be anything that you use, but that practice of doing that is going to sharpen your skill set to be able to be as accurate as possible on the things you want to down the road. So,
Yeah.
I always felt like, even in journaling when I was teaching, high school English, or my wife when she was teaching, it was like drop everything and just write. You just whatever it is, 10 minutes, stream of consciousness, whatever it is. Like you got to maybe have that kind of discipline to do that, to bring those skill sets to the table too. And like you said too,
Mhm.
reading is a huge part of that. Um,
Yeah.
I'll definitely have some links to some of your articles down below in the description here. Again, I think you've written some wonderful things, and I'm excited for people to share. As far as if people want to follow your journey and some of the things that maybe writing, or even just kind of the day to day, some of the things you got going on, or some of the reviews you have for different kind of gear. How can people kind of follow you on your socials? What are some good places for them to go ahead and do that? If you can go ahead and share that real quick.
Yeah. So really it's just Instagram is really the only place that I post on a regular basis. And that's just jordan.sillars at jordan.sillars on Instagram. So yeah, I don't do a ton of that, but I post stuff when I can and have fun with it. So, and then obviously at MeatEater, if you click on my name, all my stuff will come up there.
Yep, yep, and make sure that as you see it, there'll be like about 5 or 6 articles, and then there'll be like a get more, and then you'll see the flood works there of all the articles. So,
Yeah.
great stuff there. I'll have that link as well. And, one last question I had for you, and that's one that I ask a lot of my guests, and that's one about legacy, and especially for creatives and people who are, whether it's books or music or whatever it may be that they're putting out, the output, you have a lot that's going to be there in print, in black and white, and as far as for a long time, and the internet, as long as that's still up and running, is as far as that legacy approach of what is it that you hope that you can that you're remembered, and how you're leaving behind. And then also, on a personal setting, obviously, father of four, there's a lot to be maybe said there. So I was just kind of curious about your take of legacy, and is that something that you kind of think about on a day to day?
Yeah. I mean, I think my thoughts there go a lot more towards family than professional life. I think that everyone has lots of different vocations, and it's not just the thing you do to earn money. It's the relationships you have, whether you're a parent or a sibling, a child, the relationship you have with your parents. So that's really where I want my legacy to be, is with my kids. I want to make sure that they know that they're loved. We're a Christian household. I want to raise them to love God, and to love their neighbor. And if I can do that, I'll be pretty satisfied, whatever happens professionally. On that, I guess it's really what we've already talked about, just trying to leave a legacy that helps other people get into the outdoors, get into a place where they're appreciating God's creation and being able to, harvest their own food, know where their food comes from, really have that close connection to a place and to the land. I think we live in such a digital, disembodied age. And I think if I can help people to be a little less disembodied and a little more embodied, a little more tuned in with the physical world, I think that's a good thing. So that'd be my answer there.
Great answers. Jordan, I really appreciate you coming and onto the podcast and sharing what you shared today. I think it's going to be very enriching for folks who are listening along and watching. And just want to say thanks again for all you're doing. Appreciate, obviously helped me out with my article there too. I'll try to conjure up some more and get them over to you and put some more work on your plate there, right?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, no, everyone should go read about this melanistic deer that George shot. I'm still just like, it's crazy. Yeah, so go check that out. It's awesome. We have photos there that you'll be very interested in if you're interested in whitetail.
Cheers. And we have a couple more on the property, man. It never ceases to amaze me. As soon as one of those,
Nice.
multi mobile camera images show up, I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, there's another one. It's so neat. They're so,
that's cool,
so
man.
unique.
Yeah, for
Well, maybe
sure.
we'll have to get you down to the ranch sometime. You can see it in person. How about that?
Yeah, love it. I
Cool,
love it.
man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was great talking. I'm glad we got to connect.
Good deal, man. Well, we'll chat soon. You have a great afternoon. And once again, thanks for joining me.
All right, thanks.
Cheers.